a Dharma. We're now going to have a Dharma talk from Zen Master Jokum, Ken Kessel, who received transmission in April 2017. He began studying with Zen Master Sungsan in 1975. He's a licensed clinical social worker and a psychotherapist, working with children and families in foster care, substance abuse, outpatient and inpatient mental health and therapeutic preschool settings, as well as in private practice. He specializes in infant and early childhood mental health. He is the guiding teacher for New Haven Zen Center, Huaum Sa Oriando Zen Center, Gateless Gate Zen Center in Gainesville, and Cypress Trees Zen Group in Tallahassee. He also teaches at the Choge International Zen Center of New York, as well as other Zen centers and affiliates. I hope that bio is accurate because I pulled it from a website, and I hope it's pretty close. And at the end of our talk today, we'll have questions and answers with Zen Master Jokum. So if you're ready, Zen Master Jokum, take it away.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm very curious about the person in the bio. It sounds like I'm doing it all at the same time. And I didn't know I was that busy. In the Compass of Zen, there's a very short section just before the poem, The Human Root. It's only 3 lines. It says, when mind light returns, perceive. Then after that, go drink tea, watch your step. And like many teachings, if you see into that, then that's the only teaching you need. Mind light sounds already like something magic. But of course, our teaching is that our practice is not special. So mind light also can't be special. In fact, Unmun says, if you look at it, it's dark and dim. So really, the purpose of mind light is like a flashlight. It's to see what's before you, not to look at it yourself, or you'll blind your own eyes. The point of mind light is to see the mind light in all sentient beings, because then they become your teacher. And if all sentient beings become your teacher, then you have the mind of a student. And the mind of a student is curious, engaged, receptive, responsive, caring, kind, generous, grateful, humble, qualities that those of us who practice somehow wish to cultivate. And yet, as soon as you take on the mantle of studenthood, all of those are in there in the middle of it. So really, in many ways, part of our practice is how to engage the Sangha as our teacher. And to wonder, what is this Sangha anyway? Why have it? What are all these people doing here? Why are they in my way? And why aren't they helping me? Might be the question that we have. But the other side of that is really to appreciate the unique characteristics of each being that we meet. And just by appreciating the unique characteristics of each being that we meet, we already become their student. And of course, if you want to teach somebody something, first become their student. If you can't become their student, you can't be their teacher. And if you can't let them guide you, you can't teach them. So there's some point in there about what our being together is about. I've been thinking a bit recently about ethics in our practice. We don't talk about it explicitly very much. And when we talk about it, we often talk about ethics in terms of prohibitions from doing certain things that harm us or harm other people. But that's only part of it. Sangha is how Buddha and Dharma come to life. So if we want Buddha and Dharma to come to life for us, maybe we want to look at Sangha as the place where we heal. Because if we look at Sangha and ethics as healing, then we can trust what arises from our original nature in terms of how we hear each other and how we speak to each other, how we see each other and how we act to each other. And that's another way of saying right view, right understanding, right speech, and right action. Right view, right understanding, right speech, and right action arise spontaneously from our original nature if we really trust it, because they have no particular form. So it's entirely consistent that they would take the shape of the place that we're currently in. It's a combination of our posture and the space that we occupy and other beings that are in that space. So when mind light returns, perceive means just look at what's before you, engage, trust, respond. So drink tea is something that any of us can do. Watch your step is something that all of us have to do. That was the tea. And if I come to Los Angeles, we can all watch our step together. The other day, I was asked to consult at my job. I do mental health consultation at federal Head Start preschools. And they asked me to get involved if things are confusing or complicated, or somebody wants some help making sense of them. There was a small girl who was very, very, very timid in class, spent most of the time crying for her mother, and really didn't want to be in school, but there she was. And there was some sense on the part of the staff that maybe this had to do with the mother's anxiety about her going to school, because she had an older autistic brother, and the older autistic brother many years previously got lost by the school and had disappeared for a while. He was found, but somehow if you're in this kind of field, there's an encouragement to try to make connections in order to make sense of things, because we're looking for certainty, and living in doubt is difficult. So I was asked to meet with the family to see where this theory might go, but my preference is really not to know anything. And as I engaged with the mother and the child, what I noticed is that between the two of them, they had the best communication between a child and a parent I've seen for a long time. And the little girl was able to stay with us on a Zoom call for about an hour and 15 minutes and talk about her thoughts about the school, her fears, her anxieties about the way the teachers looked, the noisiness of the place, way it bothered her that other children weren't listening, and her not liking to be told, stop this and start that. And what became clear to me is that the problem wasn't the girl, and the problem wasn't the girl and the mother, and the problem really wasn't that she wasn't ready for school. This particular classroom wasn't ready for her. it had 5 children with unusually complicated development, a brand new teacher who didn't really have experience embracing teaching as relationship, and did what you often get taught, which is teaching as conveyance of information and guiding children through a curriculum. And of course, that didn't connect with the children who couldn't process those things. So they became unfocused. And then they became a little bit too active. And then the teachers kept trying to line them up, do this, don't do that, do that, don't do this. And that made the place an uncomfortable place for the little girl. And in the end, what it seemed is the best preparation for preschool was to be at home with her mother, participate online, and come next year to a classroom that was more well organized in the same building, but with teachers who were more prepared for her. And start with a strong relationship between the teacher and the parent and the child at the very beginning of the year, so that she got off to a good start instead of the rocky start that we provided. It wasn't something that I anticipated at the beginning of the phone call. I thought perhaps I would find something where the mother's anxiety was interfering with the child, but the fact is, this particular mother was being very responsive to the child, and the child's perceptions about whether this could become a supportive environment for her were right on the mark. If I'd been busy trying to prove a theory of mine, or if I'd been busy trying to get somebody to see something, I would have never understood that at all. So by being in a position of really letting the family teach me who they are, and letting the girl teach me who she is, what her capacities are, how bright she is, and how she related to her mother, I was able to come to some point of view with me, my translator, and the family. Uh, Maybe that's sufficient for now. I'm more inclined to respond to questions. So I'm hoping there's a robust set of them, and maybe we'll have some interaction.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you very much. If anybody has a question, you can raise your hand or just unmute yourself. I have one thought that I wanted to ask about. When you had mentioned being a teacher before, or sorry, being a student before being a teacher, that made me think of a lot of heated political discussions that are happening now, particularly the inability to make any connections, and I don't know, it just seems like everybody is at odds, and nobody's really listening. The one relationship where I don't have that is, meaning across the aisle, is with a family member of mine who actually, we do communicate and do listen to each other and don't find each other's positions automatically deplorable. And I do feel like we are able to actually make some progress and feel a little bit more connected from that. So I had never thought of it the way that you have phrased it, and I thought that was very illuminating.
That's a comment. Is there a question in there? Because that's very good teaching.
No, it wasn't a question. I'm just kicking it off.
Yeah, but even to find one person who has strong views that are opposed to your strong views, and yet have a connection between you that's more robust than the strong views you have, that's a good start. And it's interesting, you phrased your comment the way many of us phrase our observations about these kind of situations, which is everybody does this and nobody does that. And particularly when things are profoundly polarized as they are, and particularly when there's such a palpable sense of harm, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum. The feeling tone is everybody does this and nobody does that. And we're likely to be harmed. So we should band together and protect ourselves. It's an interesting point of view because that way of saying things probably is consistent across the political spectrum, that from where I stand, there's danger. And I know where the danger is coming from, and I need people who share my views, or else the danger will wash us away and we'll either burn or drown or be killed. So it's interesting that people with diametrically opposed views agree that that's the problem. So how does it come to be that people with diametrically opposed views agree that the problem is that those who disagree with me are likely to harm me and I should protect myself? It's worth inquiring into that, and certainly very much worth seeing how that arises in our own mind, that something that's incompatible with my views is dangerous. If we
part of what I immediately think about is the tone of the news that we consume, and the sort of some of the sensationalism, but how it sort of seems to be aimed at evoking fears and evoking a sense of doom and a sense of almost like some sort of war that we're all in. That's part of what I think leads to a sort of general perception. And since it happens on both sort of political sides, it seems to be they're sort of mirror imaging. They're mirror images of each other, it seems like.
Yes, and as Zen Master Sung San used to teach, this world is a world of opposites. So mirror images certainly is a good image to look at. Consider the teaching, though, when mind light returns perceive. We might want to wonder, before mind light returns, what? Because before mind light returns, I like the phrase you used, we consume this. And of course, that which we consume consumes us. And we might want to wonder, do we want to relate to what the media presents by consuming it? Mm-hmm. Because we don't necessarily have to consume it in order to see it. Mm-hmm. And if we see it, part of what we see is how dukkha plays out. Consider any habit you have that's distasteful to you, that you've had for a long time, and how you engage with it, and how it persists, and how it becomes more elaborate and seemingly more implacable, and therefore seems both more foreign and more familiar the more it persists. If you see how that works in your own mind, even sitting on the cushion, you might get some sense for how things have come to be the way they are now in the broader culture. It's not profoundly different from the workings of our mind. And our practice, of course, is perceive mind. So that doesn't mean pick the parts that you like and get rid of the parts that you don't like, and then I'll have the pure essence of mind, because the parts I don't like clearly are the impure essence of non-mind, and I want nothing to do with that. That view doesn't help, really. The third ancestor wrote, "The great way is not difficult for those who do not make distinctions. When like and dislike disappear, the true nature of things becomes clear and undisguised." So it's interesting when we look at the situation you're describing, what is clear and undisguised? Two things, I think. One is the mind light of the person before you. And if you practice perceiving other sentient beings' mind light, that makes a very wonderful bridge between you and other beings. And that can hold a lot of traffic. So that's one thing that becomes clear and undisguised. And the other thing that becomes clear and undisguised is how their suffering relates to my suffering. And do I resonate with it, or do I run from it? It's not easy all the time because we don't practice talking with people who have strenuous disagreements in order to understand them better. We either practice finding people who agree with us because we feel a greater affinity, or we practice some form of contention that really is unsatisfactory in the long run. If we reach beyond contention and we reach beyond seeking affirmation from those who share our views, maybe there's something there to be learned in the presence of those who are at least willing to have the conversation. And maybe being in the presence of those who are willing to have the conversation might teach us how to relate to those who are less willing to have the conversation. As an example, there's a book, I believe it's called 100 Robes, or maybe 300 Robes. I heard about it a number of years ago on an NPR broadcast, This American Life or something like that. I won't remember his name, but there's a Black Mississippi Delta blues musician who used to be on a circuit, and he would just play the clubs for a night or several nights, and then he'd go on to the next town and play the next club. And one evening he was playing in a club, and he was pretty much the only black face there. And during a break, a guy comes up to him and says, it's a white man, and he says, "You play our music pretty well." And he said, "What do you mean?" And he proceeded to name rock and roll and blues musicians, all of whom were white. So the black musician said, "Can I give you a little bit of education in music history?" And he proceeds to name the roots of this music, which of course weren't in white culture, but were in black culture. And of course, transported from Africa and things that I'm unqualified to talk about. But he said, yeah, this came from that. And the man said, that's interesting. Thank you. I never knew that. But I shouldn't be seen talking with you. It wouldn't be good. And the musician said, "How come?" He said, "Well, let me show you." And he opens up his wallet, and there's a Ku Klux Klan membership card that identifies him as the local Grand Wizard. He says, "I should go." So he does. And the musician goes on his way and eventually makes his way back to the same town, to the same club. And the same man is there and sits through the set. And at the end of the set, he brings him a package. And he says, "These are for you." He says, "What is it?" He says, "Open it up and take a look." He opens it up, and it's the man's Ku Klux Klan robes. He says, "I had to resign. After talking with you, I realized I couldn't stand behind what I was doing before, and I could no longer be a part of it." And the musician, subsequently, when he played those clubs, he would seek out people like that and engage them in conversations. And eventually he collected 100 robes. I don't know how to do that, but somebody does. Marina, you have your hand up.
I think Matt had a question.
So Matthew had a question, and then Bruce had a comment. The other kind of suffering is getting what you want. So that's an interesting take on things. There's birth, old age, sickness, and death, and then not getting what you want, being separated from those you love, being in the presence of those you dislike, and the imbalance of the five skandhas. So as Bruce was saying, getting what you want may actually cause suffering in a way that's similar to not getting what you want, because it's still caught up in wanting and not wanting. I may have said this the last time I was here, but if so, I'll repeat. Being in the presence of those you dislike sounds like me and somebody else. But for any of us who have sat meditation for more than 2 minutes, something arises that's distasteful, that for a while we feel that it's coming from outside, and then we recognize I've generated it and I don't like it. So you're already in the presence of somebody you don't like, and it's you. And being separated from those you love, that already happens if you're the one you dislike. Then you're no longer the person you love. So the person that you're separated from, whom you love, is you. Not getting what you want is also this internal kinds of things. I want to love myself, and I don't want to be in the presence of this self that I dislike. So you've got you, and you don't want it, so you're suffering. So if we can resolve that internal complication, then we're more likely to be able to resolve the external complication. So Matt, you had a question.
I like what you said, the poem you read, or I guess the comments that came before the human route. Because my question I had before you read that poem, then you read that poem and you used, whoever wrote that used the word return to your mind light. And that really hit me hard because I've been feeling very far from the Dharma recently in my practice. And I'm wondering if in your journey, if you've ever felt very far from the Dharma, and what was it, or what sort of things brought you back to it?
Oh, I've never been close to the Dharma.
Can you explain?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Bring me Dharma. Oh, you're not close either.
You're right.
So this not close to the Dharma is very close to it. If you're suffering because you feel like you're not close to the Dharma, that's not getting what you want. I want something, I can't get it, so I'm suffering. In your particular instance, the something you want is something you call Dharma. And whatever it is that you call Dharma is not what's currently before you, because clearly, if you're far from the Dharma, whatever is before you isn't Dharma. I would encourage you to recognize that nothing is Dharma, and then you'll always be close to not being close to the Dharma, and then all things can be Dharma.
Very clear answer. Thank you, Zen Master.
But what did you understand?
I don't do combat on here, but I just want to say that your comment that everything is Dharma, and the idea that not the idea that not being close, however you're close, not close, doesn't matter. That really hit me. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you. Unmun said, medicine and disease cure each other. The whole universe is medicine. What is your true self? So those are interesting kind of phrases. The whole universe is medicine. That goes back to the third ancestor. The great way is not difficult, only refrain from picking and choosing. Oh, if you can refrain from picking and choosing, then the whole universe is medicine. If the whole universe is medicine, then medicine and disease cure each other becomes a little bit clearer for you. So follow along those lines, and you'll find that each step you take is already the path. Where else would your foot be? You know?
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Beata wants to ask, let's see, David wanted to comment after Matt. So David, please comment.
It's a comment question, but it struck me one of the things you said in your story about going in to talk to the young girl and her family, that you went in with a don't know mind.
Oh, gee, I would never say that.
Well, you indicate that you'd like to, I guess.
Well,
Maybe
it's just that I didn't know what was happening.
right,
But acknowledging that doesn't mean I had any kind of mind.
okay. Okay. I guess. All right. My question's been shot out of the water. Thank you.
So don't know mind is one of those things that our tradition puts in the way, puts out there, and then it swallows you because it's something you think you're supposed to have, but you don't. And therefore you're a bad Zen student and you should work hard to get it. And that way of engaging is not useful. The phrase is only something to help you trust your fundamental nature. So it's not a thing, and it's not a state of mind as opposed to some other state of mind. It's like the sun already provides heat. You know, it's the nature of the sun. So to remind us to trust our own nature is to suggest not looking for some other thing. And if we're busy looking for some other thing, we're missing the point of what's before us. The simplest thing to do, and maybe therefore the hardest thing to do, is just to sit and rest and trust it. It's a little bit like this, but don't go looking for a guitar string after I say this. If you listen to some forms of music like Indian raga music or other things, there's always a string playing the fundamental, and then everything else is built on top of that, almost as if it arose out of it. And when the more beautiful parts of the melody and the harmonies subside, what's left is this like that. So there's something that's already there. And if it's already there, you don't have to put it there, and you can't make it be there. And you don't have to try to find it because it's every place. So somebody once asked me about the meaning of Layman Pong's family saying it's like touching your nose when you wash your face. He said, "What does it mean?" So I asked, "Have you ever missed?" So something like that. So Beata wanted to ask yes, Abhi Dalal. And say your name correctly if I said it wrong.
You might be familiar with the name since you're into raga. It's
Oh,
Abhi
no,
Dalal.
I'm not into raga. I've heard of raga.
Okay. Anyways, it's Abhi Dalal, but I go by Abhi or Abhi, like Abhi Dhamma. So
Okay.
there you have it. I love the last question that Beata asked, and it inspired another question for me. I don't particularly like cell phones and all the distractions it has throughout the day, and but I don't like Instagram. I don't like Facebook, but I'm keeping them because that's just the way people engage these days. I'm 26. It's something that I'm gonna have to get used to. And I'm wondering if you have any insight into putting effective parameters, because no matter, and being able to follow through with them, so that instead of like was looking at my phone, for example, in my car, I can go take a walk outside.
Do you have the experience of deciding to do something and then doing it?
Yeah, totally.
Oh, so you have that capacity? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any doubts about that capacity?
I guess before I used to do it with a lot of self-criticism.
No, I mean, if you decide, for instance, I'm going to drive to my friend's house, you get in the car and you do it. Or
yeah, I guess
if
also
you decide,
the phone has become such a convenient way to escape from pain and all the shit that goes on during the day.
oh, so
And
now you have two questions.
but at the same time, I realize, like, it's better not to go on the phone because there's a better thing to do than escape activities. There's a more strategic way to handle pain.
Do you know what that is?
Well, for kindness and acceptance and just simply doing things as I do them, and usually the best path forward naturally arises. Taking a walk, being productive. I realize time and time again, like if I'm tired, I have to put things down. I'm not in school again, so I have that luxury.
So it sounds like you don't lack clarity.
No, and now if I may ask my second question, how do you write poetry?
I don't lack clarity. For me, if I could do brush painting, I would do brush painting, but I don't have that talent. And what I've discovered for myself is that I've learned how to describe the picture I see in my head. Now, that's not a good way to say it because I don't literally see a picture in my head, but it's as if I had a picture in my head and I'm just describing it. So whether I'm doing clinical work or whether I'm engaging in questions and answers in a Dharma talk like this, or whether I'm doing consulting or I'm hanging out with my friends, I've learned to trust the voice that describes the picture that's before me. And I found that the most engaging way to do things. In terms of writing poetry, I think this is what helped the most, but it's not the only thing I do. I had written some poetry prior to becoming a teacher. And then after becoming a teacher, on my first retreat, I was at Cambridge Zen Center with Zen Master Heikong, Stan Lombardo, and the teachers aren't supposed to do anything during work period. And I thought, well, gee, Peichang said that's not right. I should listen to Peichang. So I thought, I'll write a poem for each retreatant. And I had a list of the retreatants. And during work period and during the breaks, I would try to call to mind what transpired during the interview. And I'd write a poem about that.
Wow.
The next retreat I did was in Delaware, all by myself with Jose, who hadn't become a teacher yet. And the retreat was in a church and the interview room was in another building, about a 1-minute walk down a path from the room where we were sitting. So I had about 2 minutes in between the time the person finished the interview and the time the next person came, right? Because I'd ring the bell, they'd have to walk down, the other person would walk back. So I thought, well, that seems like a time constraint, but if I don't write a poem, I'm probably avoiding something. So I just wrote something really fast, whatever came to mind, and trusted it. And it seemed to work. And then subsequently, when I had a retreat, I thought, well, I wrote a poem in the retreat with a work period, and I wrote a poem when I had no time. And now if I don't write a poem, I'm really avoiding something because clearly I can do it. So I've made a practice of just writing something down really quickly right after the interview on a retreat and trusting that. And although that's not the only way I write a poem, it's kind of informed the way that I trust what I see before I put the pen to the paper and see what comes out. Typically, I don't know the second line until I've written the first line. And I don't know the third line until I've written the second line. But there's a flow that kind of works, maybe something similar to the flow that an artist would feel if they're doing a sculpture or a painting, or maybe like a dancer would feel if they're dancing. There's something that flows. For me, it happens to be in words, but I've learned how to trust that. One other commentary about poems, because there's a history of Zen poetry, and there's a particular kind of aesthetic to it. And I'm not deeply steeped in the history of all those poems. I see them and they mean something to me. But I look at it a little bit like this. Lin-Chi said there's 4 kinds of shouts. One kind of shout is like a sword that cuts off everything. One kind of shout is like a tiger crouching in the bushes ready to pounce. One kind of shout is like a pole poking down into the reeds to see what's there. And the 4th kind of shout isn't a shout at all. So that's Lin-Chi's commentary on the function of a shout as teaching. And Lin-Chi's student who compiled this record said, and there's a 5th kind of shout that hasn't been mentioned yet. Naturally, he would say that. But the point of the poem for me is to put something out there to look at. For me, in some way, one kind of art says, look at me. And one kind of art says, look at you. One kind of art says, look at us. And one kind of art just says, look. And I'm not saying that one is necessarily better than the other, but to me, a work of art or a teaching or a poem, to the degree that it could point in many directions and that the direction is up to the viewer or the listener, to me, that's an important quality of it.
What you're suggesting also is you don't subscribe to any formula or rhythm or technique. You just write it.
Yeah, it's, if you step into a puddle, clearly your foot shapes the puddle, but we don't see that the puddle also shapes our foot. So each moment is like that too. We're co-shaping the moment with whatever happens to be before us. And I think writing is a little bit like that too. There's a shape that unfolds, and we just live inside that shape.
Thanks for your time. Who was the name of the person that said the quote about disease and medicine with?
Oh, That's in the Blue Cliff record. The Kongan is medicine and disease cure each other. Unmun.
Unmun. Okay. Thank you.
So I'm not sure what the time parameters are. We've gone about an hour and a half, and my guess is that's about as long as this is supposed to take.
That's about right. So thank
Okay,
you.
well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, Zen Master Jokum, for all your wisdom and teaching. And thanks to Marina, who I think helped orchestrate this. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., we have sitting, chanting, and interviews with Paul Park. So please make it if you can. And if not, then have a great week, everybody. Thanks again, Ken.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for your practice. Thank you, Paul.
Nanu, nanu.
Thank you.